and welcome to tonight's Fair Districts Ohio program. This is the third in a series of events happening in major regions across the state of Ohio, and we're thrilled to put Northwest Ohio on the map tonight. My name is Cynthia Peoples, and I sit on the League of Women Voters Ohio State Board, and I'm happy to be here. And we do want to go ahead and thank all of tonight's partners for making this event possible. That would be the Blade out of Toledo, my family at the League of Women Voters of Ohio, and our close friends at ACLU Ohio and Bowling Green State University. Just taking a quick look at what's ahead tonight, Lisa Wurm with the League of Women Voters Ohio and Fair Districts Ohio is going to walk us through that fight for fair maps, both past and present, if you've been paying attention to any of the public hearings going on in the past couple of days. And then Dr. Wendy Manning from Bowling Green State University will tell us how things are shaping up right here in Northwest Ohio. And then finally, Collin Marozzi, policy analyst with ACLU Ohio, will help us navigate those tricky legal requirements that should keep map makers within the framework of recent constitutional reforms. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Liz Skalka as tonight's moderator. Liz has been the Blade's political writer since 2018, covering statewide politics and campaigns. A New York University graduate, she's really an Ohio transplant from the East Coast, with stints as a city hall reporter in Stamford, Connecticut, and an editor at the New York Post. Liz, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Fair Districts for having me here tonight. I will be your moderator this evening, and I'm really hoping to just steer this ship and let other folks do the talking. We have three speakers here tonight who are going to enlighten you with their knowledge about the redistricting process, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. Some of you on this call may already know this, but here's just a brief overview of where we're at right now in the redistricting process. Last Thursday, Republicans unveiled their proposal for state legislative districts for the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate. The same day, the Ohio Redistricting Commission voted along party lines to essentially adopt those maps as a working document for discussion. So last night, the commission held the first of 3 required public hearings on their maps in Dayton. There will be more hearings this week in Cleveland and Columbus. And then Wednesday is actually the constitutional deadline for the commission to adopt maps. So that will be the day we're all watching and waiting for. And here's where things get a little bit tricky. For these maps to last for the next 10 years, they need the support of 4 of the commission's 7 members, including the 2 Democrats on the panel. Otherwise, the commission can pass a 4-year map along party lines. And pretty soon, there's actually also going to be a parallel but different process happening for congressional maps. And of course, the thing that everyone is looking at right now in the state is the fact that we are going to be going from 16 to 15 U.S. House districts in Ohio. Here in Northwest Ohio specifically, we have a lot of examples of gerrymandering in the state, and this will definitely be a part of the state to watch when it comes to redrawing those congressional maps. We've also had a lot of demographic changes occurring in this part of the state, which is really going to make it interesting to see what happens in Northwest Ohio specifically. So that's where we're at. It feels like the culmination of a lot of things happening in a very short period of time. Of course, one of the factors there was the fact that the data was delayed getting here because of the pandemic. And that, of course, wasn't something that was unique to Ohio. The entire country is dealing with that right now. And I can just tell you as a journalist, some areas that we'll be watching closely for will be whether Republicans and Democrats are actually able to come together on a bipartisan basis to pass maps. That will be one of the biggest tests of whether the reforms passed in 2015 and 2018 to essentially create less gerrymandered maps and make the process more balanced actually work. And I'm interested in seeing whether the legislative maps proposed last week, the degree to which they change on Wednesday in those few days. And also, the partisan breakdown of those maps. I know that there have been some nonpartisan analyses so far that shows that they would actually potentially boost Republican representation in both the Ohio House and Senate, where Republicans, of course, already have supermajorities. So it'll be interesting to see where that finally leads. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa Wurm. Lisa is the redistricting consultant for the League of Women Voters of Ohio. A lifelong Ohioan, she grew up in what was rural central Ohio. She graduated from OSU with a double major in communications and political science. For the past 15 years, she has worked both inside and outside of state government. She has been an aide in the state legislature and also helped manage a team on the Senate Bill 5 workers' rights ballot issue campaign. She gained experience working on voting rights issues as a lobbyist for the ACLU and continued her passion fighting for human rights while directing policy, communications, and development for a disability rights organization. Most recently, she contracted with the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, assisting with the election protection efforts. And with that, Lisa, we hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's great to meet you online after reading your great articles. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, so I'm Lisa. I'm working for Fair Districts, and I'm just going to go over what's been happening with the Redistricting Commission. So they started with public hearings across the state at the end of August. They gave us about a week notice. All the hearings were held during the day only. And despite that time frame, which definitely restricted a lot of folks from attending, and some were 2 times during the day. I'm sure some of you may have attended. There were still hundreds of people there filling the hearing rooms. Extra rooms had to be open, locations were changed, chairs were brought in. Unfortunately, these weren't as well attended by the committee members as we would have liked. There was a lot of representatives for the representatives. But Senator Vernon Sykes and Auditor Faber were in attendance the whole time. So now what happened last week is that there was a hearing on, we got about 24 hours notice. So just the skin of our teeth, their teeth required 24-hour notice. There were 2 hearings in one day. So the maps were proposed in the morning and approved in the afternoon hearing by a 5-2 vote. And the 2 no votes were the Democrats on the committee, which are Senator Vernon Sykes and Minority Leader Amelia Sykes. So what you can see here is the Sykes proposed a map today, actually, and then in the not yet, but then in the next slide, I'll go over what the Republicans proposed. So when the Republican maps were proposed, they claimed not to know the partisan lean of the maps or to have them reviewed for racial gerrymandering. So that's very concerning to us as advocates. It seems like they aren't paying attention to something that is required in the Constitution. So while we continue to battle that out with them, the Sykeses have proposed this map. So this is just a screenshot of what's on Dave's Redistricting, which is the software program. So this is what the northwest corner of the state would look like under the Sykeses map. And then on the next slide, you can see what it would look like. So somewhat similar, which these are as Liz explained so well in the beginning, these are the maps that we're working with. So you can see kind of 76 is where there's the lines are much more spread out. So it's a matter of what this looks like. And you can access these maps as well on our website. So what we've got here is when we were discussing what those gerrymandered districts would look like. And let's be clear, these maps are gerrymandered. They may not have the ridiculous shapes such as the duck and the snake, but they would actually, as Liz stated, they would give possibly more seats to the Republicans. So, and not that it matters, Republican or Democrat, both have participated in gerrymandering, but what we've got here is pretty concerning for us, because we're talking about a balance and they haven't done that. So again, the 15th is our deadline. Supposedly there will be new maps. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what's going on. They're in the hearing that's going on right now. They have discussed having conversations behind closed doors about what those will look like. So we just really don't know what that's going to end up being on the 15th. So we hope, and they keep saying we hope, that we'll get 10-year maps, and that would honestly be the goal. So we can go to the next slide. So, and to remind us what we're talking about, why we're saying this is gerrymandered, what we have in Ohio is something that is not proportional to our voting population. So we have our over here on one box, we have the congressional elections. So those are 55% Republican votes. So Ohio does lean Republican, but the seats are 75%. And right now we're dealing with House maps. So you can see on the other box here. So we've got about a 64-36 split, and that's a super majority, which means that the legislature, the Republicans in power, can pass whatever they want without Democratic votes. So next slide, please. Okay, so we've got one hearing going on right now. We had one yesterday in Dayton that went on for 4 hours, maybe even 5. I think we lost count. It was pretty exhausting. And then we have one tomorrow. So this is a really jam-packed week. Yes, the census is a reason for delay, but for us, it's not a reason that they could have had some other discussions, because while in committee, they're discussing what the Voting Rights Act is and what proportional representation is and representational fairness. And so we're having all these debates now when we could have had them in April when Fair Districts called for them to meet. And so I will note something about the hearing tomorrow. So people in Marietta can actually drive to Washington State Community College and then give testimony there, and then they'll hear it in Columbus, which is particularly frustrating considering that virtual testimony has been called for a year, and just now they're giving remote testimony, but you still have to be physically somewhere. They'll receive it, but you can't give it. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we have a lot of resources. If you're interested in testifying, if you look at these maps and they make you upset, you feel like they divide your community, we have everything that you need to prepare for that. And I'm also here as well to help. Just showing up is amazing, as well as submitting written testimony. So it's like getting these things on the record. It's really important. And you'll see Michael's posting things in the chat, but we'll also send out an email as well. And you can find everything on the Fair District's website. So next slide, please. And we're also, believe it or not, we're only halfway through. We're not even, this is, it's not a spurt, feels like we're marathon. So, unfortunately, we will have until we have another, after these maps are passed, we're going to have to do congressional. So we get to do this all over again, but the legislature will be drawing the maps. So we have no idea what that will look like. The commission seems to be really delaying. They have the commission has a much better public hearing to allow testimony, and then the legislature hasn't made a peep. So we have no idea what their hearings are going to look like. They're also required to have hearings, which is what's happening right now with the Redistricting Commission. So the congressional maps are required to have 2 public hearings. So we are still doing, with that being said, a lot of what's happening in these state hearings, the state maps hearings, is they're actually discussing in detail a map winner from our state maps. So the winners were announced. I'm sorry, my slide's a little bit out of date. So the winners were announced and they're discussing these maps in committee. So it's very interesting, in the commission, I should say. So it's been very interesting. So you can still draw your maps for congressional, and we're giving away prizes and you're entered to win no matter what. But it's really interesting to take your hand at it. So that's a way you can participate as well. Next slide, please. The other thing we have coming up is an in-person event on Tuesday, September 21st at the Ohio State House. We are delivering a petition, so you can sign the petition. We're hoping to get to 5,000 by next week. I can't believe it's coming up next week. You can also take your testimony or just generally write a letter to the editor. We have a tool that will help you do that. It's a website that you can just put right through. It will pull up your papers for you and give you some talking points. And so registration for the event, which is our best in-person event, there'll be some fun things we're cooking up. You get a t-shirt and we're scheduling, to the best of our ability, scheduling meetings with legislators. So that's all happening next Tuesday. And we're also still doing postcards. We're delivering postcards to the Secretary of State and the Governor on Fair Maps Day on September 21st. So if you order those, you can get them and bring them with you if you come on the 21st at this point. Otherwise, you can order the other black cards here. That's another way to take action. And then we do have one more of these events coming up on the 21st. So if you can't make it to Columbus, tune in for Cincinnati. We're having some great journalists around the state moderate. So, and we also have monthly huddles, so you can keep up what's going on. And this was just in case we needed to discuss the timeline, which we already did. So I'm going to turn it back over to Liz.
Awesome. Great. So next up, we have Dr. Wendy Manning. Dr. Manning is currently the Distinguished Professor of Sociology at Bowling Green State University. She has her PhD, master's, and undergraduate sociology degrees from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She serves as Director of the Center for Family and Demographic Research and co-director for the National Center for Family and Marriage Research. Dr. Manning, it's all you.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to say that I'm a family demographer and a major census enthusiast. So I was very involved in trying to get a full count for a census. I think that's where my expertise is coming from here. And I think it's important to set the context of the demography of Northwest Ohio when we think about this in terms of redistricting. So as many of you who are from the area, of course, know that we are experiencing a population decline in Northwest Ohio, with even, this was projected, so it's not a big surprise. Based on the 2020 census, we'll have 1.4 million folks here in Northwest Ohio. It's a slight decline from what we observed in 2010. And so we're not enjoying the same population growth as the rest of the state of Ohio, which is of course experiencing some increase, not a major increase at 11.8 million. So the population change, even within our region of Northwest Ohio, is spotty. There's some counties that have done real well in terms of population growth and others that have lost population. And so the big winner in terms of population in our region is Wood County. It's a county where the cities of Bowling Green and Perrysburg are, as well as others. They've observed about a 6,700 growth in the number of people here. It's about 5.4% increase. The other two counties in our region that have had more than a 1% increase would be Auglaize and Mercer counties. And so those are just areas that we might want to look at when we're thinking about population change and thinking about where we want to have our political representation and how we organize our voting districts. So we have, we don't know a lot yet about the 2020 census that has been released. So we know, what we do know is the overall population of counties. We know the voting age. We know the share of the population according to racial and ethnic identity. And that's an important factor when we think about population change here in Ohio. We have observed a growth in representation from racial and ethnic minority groups. This has also been reflected in the state of Ohio and also in our region of Northwest Ohio. We in Northwest Ohio we have they use something called a diversity index, but about 82% of the population is defined as white, as opposed to for our whole state, it's 77% of the population has a white identity. So just something to think about when we think about where population is occurring and who's living in different parts of the state. And of course, that might have implications for other factors that are related to the interests of this group. We also want to think about sources of population change. As demographers, populations change through natural increase. So there was more births than deaths. And so happily in the state of Ohio and in our region, we've had more births than deaths. So we still have some natural increase occurring, but we do have an aging population. So we have a growth in deaths. We have declining birth rates in across the nation. And we reflect that very well here. We also have our declining birth rates. And so we have a smaller rate of natural increase. So the population is not growing as fast as it was, partly due to that. Another force that's operating here is migration out of the region. And so that's where we see a lot of folks, particularly working age people, moving out of our region to other parts of the state or other parts of the country. We're also seeing declines in international migration. So we have fewer people moving here from other countries. And that has to do with a number of factors. But we also have observed declines there. So those are some of the sources of change in our population that we can think about. I think when it's right now difficult to track population change across some of these very specific map boundaries because the data aren't quite available or easily accessible at this time. But I think it's really important to be mindful and keep in the forefront of your mind sort of the demography of our region as we're thinking about redistricting in Ohio. Thank you.
Great. So last but not least, we have Collin Marozzi. Collin serves as a policy strategist for the ACLU of Ohio. Based out of the Columbus office, Collin works with coalition partners, community stakeholders, and elected officials. Collin is primarily focused on enacting criminal justice reforms, ensuring equal protection for the LGBTQ community, expanding voting rights, and advocating for fair maps. Collin, here you go.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, and thank you to everybody here and all my co-panelists. I love any opportunity I get to talk about redistricting across the state. It really is, I love to say it shapes our future, redistricting through the drawing of new congressional and General Assembly districts. And it's critically important how people understand the implications of what new district lines can have on their families, on their communities, and on our national politics as well. So I wanted to cover some of the legal requirements, the new legal requirements that our map drawers are contending with as we speak with the General Assembly maps, but also kind of forecasting what is on the horizon when we switch to congressional redistricting. And I guess the first the first thing I want to speak on is the elephant in the room, or I guess I should say the snake on the lake. I've been thinking about that one all day. But obviously, we all know Ohio's 9th congressional district is severely flawed for a number of different reasons. To have in a narrative sense, to have a congressional district that spans essentially 3/4 of the Lake Erie shoreline, spanning from one major metropolitan area to another. It does not contain a whole county in and of itself. So obviously there is a lot of room for improvement for Ohio's 9th congressional district. And I wanted to talk about some of the new rules that are in Article 19 of the Ohio Constitution, which was issue 1 back in 2018, when over 74% of Ohioans casted a vote for these reforms because they wanted to end gerrymandering in our congressional districts. And some new rules that have been put in place will certainly tie the hands of the map drawers. However, as we'll get to later, I want to point out that though there are new rules and though there are new requirements that must be met, that does not guarantee a fair map, and it is still going to be up to all of us on this call, all of our friends and family, to get engaged and stay engaged on this issue. So the first thing I want to talk about is compactness. And compactness is a measure that a particular district has, and essentially what it means is how close together is it? How confined is it to a homogeneous geographic space? Obviously, the 9th congressional district is severely lacking in compactness. And in fact, according to several of the popularly available redistricting websites and data analytics tools out there, it is highly rated as one of the least compact districts of our entire state and of the entire country. Now, and we know that because it extends, like I said before, from the far west side of Lake Erie all the way through to the western shores of Cuyahoga County's shore of Lake Erie. And it just kind of follows along the coastal line. Again, it does not contain an entire county within itself. So there are new rules put in place. One that says all new congressional districts shall be compact. That's compulsory language. It says they shall be compact. However, again, there's not a defined metric for how we will measure compactness. And unfortunately, there are several different measures for compactness. If you are familiar with Dave's redistricting app, they use the REOC and the Paulsby-Popper metrics, which essentially measure how far something is out and how far something is indented in. There are additional metrics for measuring compactness, but there is the requirement that they have to be contained to a geographic unit more reasonably than they are today. The 9th congressional district is not the only example of a non-compact district. Ohio's District 4, Jim Jordan's district, has also been widely panned as not compact as well. The next requirement is contiguousness, which means that you have to be able to put your pen on a piece of paper and draw, without taking your pen off the piece of paper, a single line that fully encompasses an entire district. You can't have one chunk of one district here and then another chunk over here. They have to be one cohesive unit. And I raise this point because Ohio District 9 is actually, again, in very rare company among all 435 congressional districts in our country, because depending upon recent weather patterns, District 9 is not compact, because the only thing that connects District 9 is a bridge between Ottawa and Erie counties. Now, in a heavy rain, water level rises. You cannot get from one part of the county to the next while traveling solely through the congressional district. Unfortunately, in Ohio and in Article 19, when we talk about contiguousness, there is such a thing called water boundary contiguousness, which allows for the sort of district shaping that I just referred to, the fact that it's only contiguous through a body of water. That is allowed. That is allowed in Title 19 of the Ohio Constitution. But however, the contiguousness requirements coupled with additional requirements will prevent a district like Congressional District 9 from being drawn in 2021. And the biggest source of those requirements is actually the county splitting requirements that are included. And advocates and reformers, when they were negotiating issue 1 in 2018, really focused in and honed in on these county split requirements. And there's a number of them that play a part in Congressional District 9. One of them is we actually, for the first time, have a set number of counties that can be split and a set number of times a county can be split within itself. Currently in our Constitution, of the 88 counties of the state, 65 have to remain whole within one district. 65 have to remain whole. 18 counties can be split once, and up to 5 counties can be split up to 2 times. Now it's up to the map drawers which counties do and do not get split. But you one look at at Ohio's current congressional map, and you can see that those county split requirements will dramatically change the way our congressional maps are shown. The next, which is an interesting, the next splitting requirement, which is interesting, is that in the new requirements, no district is allowed to share borders with another district across 2 counties unless those counties have over 400,000 people living in it. So let's just take, let's look at District 9 and how it shapes with District 4. District 4 and District 9 actually touch in both Erie and Lorain counties. Neither of those have over 400,000 individuals. So that type of boundary would not be legal according to Article 19 of the Ohio Constitution. And there's also a requirement, and this is what we'll get into later, is that the map drawers shall attempt to fit one whole county within each congressional district. Now, Lucas County, the most populated county in the Northwestern region, has a population roughly of 430,000 people. That is easily enough to contain wholly in one congressional district, while also preserving room to actually fill additional use additional whole counties to fill that seat. Yet again, it's going to be up to the map makers once they actually draw the maps as to how that will comply. But we are looking forward to Lucas County actually being contained wholly within a single congressional seat. So that's kind of an overview. Oh, sorry, my motion light here in my office went off. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I wanted to focus here on the proposed Ohio General Assembly map plans, and Lisa got into this a little bit earlier. And I wanted to show you a couple pictures here and just kind of talk through their differences and what they mean for the state of Ohio and for the voters of Ohio. So the picture on the left here, you can see is the currently introduced Republican-sponsored district plan. And what's interesting about this map here is because for the first time, Wood County actually has more population than what would need to be in one whole district. So previously, Wood County had a set population that gave them the status of having to be one entire House district. Wood County grew over the past decade. They now have roughly 130,000 individuals. That's just outside the allowable variance of a ratio of representation for the Ohio House. So this gives map makers a wide array of opportunities for creating new districts than what we currently have. And as you can see here on the left, the current map drawers decided to draw a line intersecting Wood County vertically, dividing it in east and west, with having Bowling Green University and Bowling Green City completely contained in the eastern portion of the county, but also the western part connecting Upper Hancock County and also western Lucas County. Now, it's an interesting choice to do that, given the proportionality requirements that you may have heard people talking about with the General Assembly plan, which calls for more proportionality in seats through the General Assembly. Because I wanted to switch over to the picture on the right here, which is just a map that I threw together in about an hour or so. And as you can see, it splits Wood County north and south. And what that does is that it actually affords 2 swing districts rather than only 1, as in the current map proposed, currently being considered by the Ohio General Assembly. There are other differences here. Obviously, we can see in the proposed map that the surrounding suburbs of Toledo are connected to the Lake Erie Shores portion of Lucas County, while my map keeps the western half of Lucas County together, and it follows along the Maumee River to create its own district. And then a second portion comes out of the eastern half of Toledo and then encompasses Ottawa counties, Port Clinton, etc. This map, by the way, both of these maps show roughly 8 House districts. The map on the left, the one that's currently being proposed, allows for 3 Democratic seats and 5 Republican seats, with the swing-ish district being the eastern part of Wood County, which is roughly about 52% Republican to around 46-45% Democrat. If you look at the map on the right, it gives 3 seats to Democrats, 3 seats to Republicans, and 2 very competitive House district seats, roughly split between 2 to 3 percentage points. So when you hear people talk about creating maps that are proportional, that are fairer, that give people an opportunity to affect the outcome of an election, the election isn't predetermined before they cast their ballot. Fair districts, the ACLU, myself, would argue that the map on the right actually complies far better than the map on the left, because it has more swing districts and more districts that will create responsive legislators to their constituents. I know that was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to the Q&A period, but I will go ahead and send it back over to Liz.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Collin. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Lisa. This really touched on a lot of different parts of this discussion that's important to understand. So now is the Q&A. I have a few questions that were in the chat before. If you have questions, throw them into the chat and hopefully we'll see them and get to them. The first question that we have tonight, and this is great, and this gets to the heart of a lot of the challenges I think that we're going to be seeing to these maps. When would the Ohio Supreme Court become involved in legal challenges? And again, I think that speaks to, if we can address just legal recourse and anything we're going to be seeing on that in the next few years. And Collin, that kind of sounds like that would be.
I was just going to say, I'll go ahead and take that one. So it remains to be seen whether or not there will be any sort of legal challenge. However, if there is, it will be immediately in the Supreme Court. Section 9 of Article 11, which is dealing with General Assembly districts, gives the Ohio Supreme Court what's called exclusive or original jurisdiction on any legal challenges facing Ohio's General Assembly map plan. Now, we've got to make sure we know that when we're talking about legal challenges to any map, that we understand what is and is not what you were talking about, Liz, what is and is not recourse, what the Supreme Court can and cannot do. For instance, they cannot order the creation or the drawing of any specific district or any specific statewide district plan. They can only identify districts that violate portions of the Ohio Constitution, and then they will direct the Ohio Redistricting Commission to actually redraw the district in order to comply. If that were the case, the commission would have 30 days to complete the redrawing of the map and have to be resubmitted to the Supreme Court for approval. Same goes for congressional districts. The Ohio Supreme Court will have original jurisdiction there, and really the same rules apply. They can't issue an order to draw a specific district, but they can find districts that are in violation and then direct either the General Assembly or the Redistricting Commission to redraw that, depending upon the author of the original plan.
Okay, a lot of steps. So one thing that I know that we're interested in discussing, Collin, you touched on this a little bit in your remarks, talking about the proportion clause, because it seems like the maps that we were presented with on Thursday do not hit that. I mean, what is the likelihood that we're going to see maps with that? What does that look like? And is that really being considered as far as the maps that we're looking at right now?
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead and answer, but then, Lisa, feel free to jump in after me if you'd like. But there's there's debate currently going on, a debate that I don't believe has much merit, which is that this proportionality language and this, not unduly favoring one political party over another criteria, whether or not it is an actual requirement or whether or not it is what's called aspirational, whether or not it's just a goal, because, and people that say that it's just a goal, they commonly cite a phrase in a piece of the language that says that the commission shall attempt to create these districts that are proportional and that don't favor. My assertion would be that everything leading up to Section 6, leading up to the proportionality and the not unduly favoring a party language is in pursuit of this Section 6 proportionality requirement. This is what the people of Ohio voted for. They didn't go to the polls by the millions in 2015 to vote in order for Ohio to have 95% to 105% of a ratio representation. They didn't go to the polls to vote for a way to determine Senate incumbency. They went because they wanted fairer maps and they wanted more proportional districts. So I think when we hear from the commission say that, this really isn't a requirement, it's kind of, we have to comply with other things first before we can even get to that. I really don't think that argument holds a lot of water. And let me just say this also, even for the sake of argument, let's say that was the case, that it was aspirational. Is the proposed map meeting that requirement when it extends GOP control in both chambers? That's like me saying, if I have to attempt a high jump and I go up to the bar and without jumping, I instead dig a 3-foot hole and sit in it, does that constitute an attempt? I argue not. In my motion light. Go ahead, Lisa.
I don't know what else to say, Collin. That's a great analogy with making an attempt, right? Like there's not much I can add because I don't see an actual genuine attempt, and that's what will be left up to determine whatever direction they decide to go, if they're going to listen to the people or not.
Speaking of things that are left up in the air and yet to be determined, what can we expect on Wednesday? Is there a possibility that there will be maps presented and passed that we haven't seen, maps that people won't get an opportunity to weigh in on that hadn't necessarily been presented in previous public meetings? Can someone speak to that?
I would say, so we don't know what's going to happen on Wednesday. Since this is a new process for everyone, if I'm if I'm looking at it, obviously not from a extreme legal perspective, I'm not a lawyer. I feel like, I don't know if the technicality, the letter of the law will be held up by having these 3 proposed hearings. After the proposed maps, I don't really know how that process will play out. We don't know if they're going to introduce maps at the end of this hearing today. I don't know if it's still going on. So I think tomorrow, essentially what we could end up with is a vote, but we could not end up with a vote. I mean, it's really unknown. I don't know. Collin, do you have any better speculation than I don't know?
Well, I will say, you know, when the Redistricting Commission originally adopted or introduced the plan that they're working on now, it was under the assumption that this was going to be a working document. You know, multiple members of the Redistricting Commission said that, you know, I believe Secretary Frank LaRose said it needed substantial work. You know, Auditor Keith Faber said, you know, I'm willing to vote for this as a working document. And, you know, to be honest with you, I'm going to be speculative here, but I honestly expect there to be changes made. We know that the Democratic members of the Redistricting Commission just released or unveiled their proposed changes to the Republican map. So we know that, you know, people are working on changes. And I fully expect there to be some changes. Now, the question is whether or not it will be enough to garner the necessary bipartisan support on the commission for it to, you know, get the 2 Democrats' votes and thus be in play for 10 years. If it does not, and it's only Republicans on the commission that pass or that vote to pass the map, we will have a 4-year map. So, you know, there's going to be a lot that happens in the next 48 hours. So I would make sure to stay tuned because it is going to be a wild ride.
Related to that, can the September 15th deadline, I mean, is that in any way fungible? Can there be a good faith attempt to try to extend that a little bit into the future?
Well, so, you know, my short answer would be no. There would have to be some sort of intervention, some sort of petition to the Supreme Court in order for that deadline to be extended. You know, the one reason why we heard that it was supposedly not a big deal that the commission missed the September 1st deadline is because there's this, you know, kind of kick the can down the road clause, if you will, to where it actually allows it to go from September 1st to September 15th. And there weren't any written consequences in the Constitution for missing that September 1st. That kick the can clause does not exist following September 15th. So, you know, and honestly, neither should it. Ohioans, you know, demanded that these maps, when they went to the ballot in 2015, they demanded that these maps be passed fairly and they be passed on time. And constitutional amendments don't work like that. It's not a give or take. It's kind of a obligation of the commission to meet the letter of the law. And certainly we would expect them to meet the spirit of the law as well.
This will be our first hard deadline test. So I think we'll see what the options will be. And if they do have to go to the 4-year map process, I don't know how that's going to happen all in one day, just from a logistical perspective. I mean, they've done things similar. So, but with a 4-year map, you're going to have more. It's going to require more explanation and more strict rules. So they're probably trying to avoid that. I would assume so, but I can't say for sure.
Let me just throw this in there. When I said, you know, these next 36 hours are going to be a wild ride. We need to make sure we remember that the commission is meeting Wednesday at 10 a.m. They technically have until Wednesday at 11:59 to pass a map. So we could be seeing extended recesses where negotiations are taking place. We could see new maps being introduced. It really is, a very fluid situation that could unfold on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. To talk about four-year maps for 1 second, I do have a question for Wendy, but I feel like we've been talking so much in this process, we've just been looking ahead to 10-year maps, and that's sort of been our aspirational goal. But in general, are four-year maps going to look any different? What would be the main differences between a 10-year and a four-year map?
I'll go ahead and take that. I think it may be more of a question for us rather than Dr. Manning.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, different question for her. Sorry, continue.
Did you need to finish the question? I'm sorry.
No, I was saying I had a future question for Dr. Manning.
Oh,
but
okay. Great. So the four-year maps, what are the chances?
Well, just what are going to be the main differences? Because we've spoken so much and looked ahead to 10-year maps so often. It looks like we may not get there. What would be the major differences if we do get four-year maps?
So if we do get four-year maps, the major difference is that it doesn't require minority party approval. So it only requires, I think, 4 members of the commission. So what we would be looking at is majority drawn maps from that perspective. I'm not saying that that's what we'll end up with, but that's what we would have if it goes to a four-year map. There's narrative requirements and specific limits on gerrymandering, which Collin, feel free to add something after I'm finished. So it is a more strenuous process. But there are other steps to that, especially with the explanation that can give you a better guidance of what they're actually thinking if they have to write a narrative about every single decision they have to make. So, Collin, do you have anything else to add for four-year maps?
Well, again, I think my short answer would be that, a four-year map would look an awful lot like the one that was introduced last Thursday. Both co-chair Senator Sykes and Leader Sykes both panned the proposal immediately. I think if you're, looking for what, a four-year map will look like versus a 10-year, it's certainly going to be obviously weighted more towards the majority party. And there will be again, speculating here, but I would envision an extension of General Assembly seats to the majority party, potentially lower amounts of what are called opportunity districts. It really is yet to be seen. And that's why, it's interesting when we think, the dynamics on the commission. Obviously the majority members of the commission, the 5 Republicans, have the numbers, but the real power of the commission comes from the Democrats, because without them, they essentially have a veto on any 10-year map. So it really is going to come down to whether or not they can sit down and reach a compromise and make, just kind of strike a bargain. It is yet to be seen if that will happen, but the 2 Democrats on the commission certainly hold the power to have a 4-year map or have a 10-year map. And it just kind of comes down to whether or not they can get the majority members to meet them halfway.
This is my question for Dr. Manning, and I apologize about that before. Our census data, are these good numbers that we're working with? Because obviously the data was so delayed. We collected it during a pandemic year. Are we working with good numbers right now? Is this really what we're seeing in this part of the state?
I think that's an excellent question. I don't think we ever will know the true answer to that question. Definitely, there was a number of challenges. One of the advantages maybe of collecting data during a pandemic, though, where more people were home, so more people were available to answer the census. So I'd like to think that one of the issues that might have affected the population of areas that have universities are if those students were not on campus. There were a lot of questions about where they should be counted. Should they be counted where they're supposed to be counted where they were living on April 1st? Some of those students were actually living with their parents. And so they might have been counted in home districts, but are actually living here in Northwest Ohio. So I think that presents some certain challenges, but I think it's the best we have, and so people are willing to move forward with these data.
And you talked a little bit about how our part of the state fits with the state overall. Can you just talk a little bit about Ohio and how our state is looking a little bit different than the rest of the country, and some of what else the census data told us in 2020?
I mean, I think some people were frustrated that we've lost a seat because they say, well, our population is growing, but the issue is our population is not growing as fast as many other states in the nation. So you look at some of the fast growing states, we're still a large state. We still matter in the political scene. So I think that's an exciting part about living in Ohio, is that you feel, at least during election years, that your votes matter. So I think that's important. We are aging more than other populations. So if you see other states, particularly those in the South, you're going to see a lot more growth because of migration of folks from Ohio moving to those states, as well as higher fertility levels. And so there's challenges, I think, in a state like Ohio to try to make it more appealing to young people who grow up here to stay here. And that's a challenge, and also to be supportive of diverse populations and encourage our state to be welcoming of everybody. So I think that's some of the challenges we have moving forward in terms of demography.
Thank you. So this is our last question before I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia again. And I think this really just speaks to a larger call for action and people who are wondering how they can get involved in this process and how they can actually be effective in this process. How do people appeal to legislators who are, afraid of, they're thinking more about their jobs than maybe drawing maps here? How do people actually get their voices heard? And related to that too, I mean, we've heard from so many people in these hearings who are appealing for more time, hearing more experts, just more public input on these maps. Are they being heard? What sort of options do they have right now?
Well, I'll go ahead and start.
Okay, go ahead, Collin. You first.
So the best way that they can get involved is call their legislator. You call their office, tell them who you are, tell them where you live, tell them why you want fair maps. I mean, you got to make your voice heard in this. And believe me, that's, if I could tell you how to go about that and guarantee that they will listen to you, I would, but I can't. If there's any way to show up at hearings, whether it's, I know that, the next couple hearings are going to be both in Columbus, but when the congressional districts come around, hopefully we need to start pressuring the General Assembly now to hold regional hearings like they did for the General Assembly maps. You can go onto Fair District's website and use our data tools to draw your own maps, or to write your own community maps and talk about what makes your community and why you think it should be kept whole and included in the part of the state that you want it to be. There's a number of different ways. Write a letter to the editor. you have to talk to your friend at the grocery store. Get people talking about this, because it won't happen unless we all, are involved and we're all pressuring our lawmakers. Because you're right. At the end of the day, when it comes to redistricting, lawmakers are considering two things: whether job security or fairness is, what weighs more. And we need to make sure that our legislators know that we demanded fairness in 2015, and we still are.
Great. Anything else from anybody else? Lisa, Wendy? Otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Cynthia.
Okay, I think that's my cue. Thank you so much, Liz, Dr. Manning, Lisa, and of course, Collin, all very informative. I do have a couple of two immediate ways that you can take action, really just piggybacking off of a couple of those items that Lisa mentioned at the top of the program, namely Fair Maps Day. This is going to be a huge day for the state of Ohio to get your voices out, as Collin was just saying, and get up in the face of those legislators. On Fair Maps Day on Tuesday, that's next week, September 21st, from 10 in the morning until 2 p.m. We will have a full lineup of speakers. We're facilitating legislator visits so that you can get up in those faces and tell them what you want in your maps, what community should look like. And we'll also be sitting on a couple of key committee hearings as well. You don't want to miss this event. Be sure to go ahead and register tonight, at that link that you see there on your screen. And I'm sure Michael Barron is going to go ahead and drop that link for you in the chat as well. And then the second way that you can take action is the redistricting competition that Lisa mentioned at the top of the show there as well. We are still looking for those congressional map submissions. The deadline is September 15th. That's Wednesday, 5 o'clock. You can go ahead and head over to the Fair Districts website to register. And then there's all kinds of great links there to help you draw what those congressional lines should look like. We do have first, second, and third place winners. First place gets $750, second $500, and third $250. Of course, you get those amazing bragging rights across the state of Ohio, and that first place winning map will be featured across the state and potentially influence how our congressional map will look in the very near future. We do encourage you to head over to the Fair District site. Like I said, there's a lot of great information there and easy ways to keep up with the latest news, updates, hearings. You can watch some of those recordings, look at those templates for letters to the editor, and great ways to get involved. And don't forget to order those postcards. Like Lisa said, we are collecting those for Fair Map Days because we are going to drop those off with Governor DeWine and Secretary of State LaRose. Thank you so much. And Liz, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. This was really informative. This is such an important issue to learn about. It's really complicated. There's only a handful of people in like every state who really understand this. And so it's great to have some of those people in here in this chat, helping us all just really understand what is going to be going on ahead with this process and what we should all be paying attention to. Thank you all for watching me as I went dark here. I have a light now, too little too late, but thank you all so much. And I really enjoyed doing this, and there'll be a lot more news in the coming weeks. Thank you. Thank you so much, Fair Districts.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.